Sales Ascender, hey, check this out. If you've always hated being that guy or that girl when it comes to sales, this is the place that you want to be. The Spotlight Series, we're going to focus on something called reciprocity selling. All right, for today's guest, to get into reciprocity selling, here is what it's going to be like. You're going to hear a story about somebody that you probably can relate really closely to. Someone that was on the verge of giving up, quitting, closing the business because it wasn't working. There was $0 coming in. But with the help of a podcast growing organically, he was able to go from $0 to over $500,000, again, with a podcast organically, with something that's called reciprocity selling. Here on the Spotlight Series at Sales Ascenders, you know we love to focus on the sales conversation. So we're really excited to get into kind of this new term that I haven't heard before with none other than Evans Putnam. Evans, how's it going, man?
I'm doing great, Chris. Thanks for having me. I hadn't heard of that term. Actually, that's not the way I taught it before until probably like 2 nights ago when I woke up at 3 a.m. and bam, it was just right into my head. There's the answer I've been looking for. Reciprocity selling is a new term for me, but it's not a new way of doing things.
That makes complete sense. And I'm even more excited to get into this a little bit more today because you told me that you had it at 2 a.m. You and I both know, myself and Sean and Melissa, we're just business partners. We're talking about this 2 days ago. We're like, we had some new fun ideas in our business and we couldn't sleep last night. Here's what I was getting. That's, I don't know. It's the toll of being an entrepreneur, right?
Yeah, definitely. Problems seem to be solved at like 2, 3 in the morning, much to our dismay. But one thing I've learned, I'll give everybody a tip real quick. I don't know if you guys do this, Chris, but if it happens, don't do like me. I used to fight it and be like, oh, I'm not going to, just not do anything. I'll remember it in the morning. And then that nagging voice kept saying, no, and it would keep me up. So now I get the phone or I get the piece of paper and I put it down immediately. And then I actually think that, like, it's as if I'm talking to a person. I'm like, thank you for that idea. I appreciate it. I'm grateful for it. Now I'm going to go back to sleep. And it works.
So number one, what I heard you say is it helps you sleep better. That is totally the absolute truth for me. And you will never remember. Like, if you're someone watching this and you remember those crazy moments of epiphany or insights that just hit you in a flash, please let me know what your diet is or what secret you have. I want to know it. But for now, Evans is writing it down. I'm writing it down. And I'm excited to get into this one. Wherever you're watching this video, comment with us. Let us know. Let us know when you have your great ideas, which ones that you've been having, which ones you're most excited about. If you write them down, if you always remember them, this is definitely a conversation that we want to have with you guys for sure. So that said, Evans, reciprocity selling, what got you going this direction?
Well, it's funny, when I thought about coming on and doing this interview, I was like, am I really going to go into the Sales Ascenders group and say, we made all our money by not selling? Right?
I'm listening. You have my attention. Right? I think that's a great approach.
But it's not 100% true, right? So the real story is, I was with this podcast. I came on as a partner in this business. My partner was like the attractive character, right? He was the podcaster. It was his story, his vision, but he didn't know how to get it out in the world. He didn't know how to market it. He didn't know how to create anything to sell out of it. And he didn't know how to grow his audience. So I came in with the specific goals of growing the audience, which we did really well in the beginning. We had it to 75,000 monthly downloads, monthly listeners average at one point. Then eventually it got up to 160, 150 and stayed in that range. And it was all organic. But here's the kicker. With that kind of traffic coming in, you should be able to build a really valuable list. You should be able to get consistent sales. But we hadn't figured that part out yet, right? So it was a learning process for both of us. And what happened was we were trying to direct sell from the podcast, right? Even though we had great testimonials for some of the things we did sell, one of our courses got amazing results. We were selling real estate agent sales. We were selling sales courses, right? And we couldn't figure out how to sell them, which is sort of ironic. That's the first time I've even thought about that. But we would try the direct sale approach from the podcast, like interrupt the conversation, drop the mid-roll sort of commercial, with read a testimonial, even pitch it, and we might get 1 or 2 sales. And you're
interesting. Okay. I've always wondered about that, like in the result of that approach in podcast.
And I'm not saying that it can't be done correctly, but with us, it was not. I think it would depend on a different model, right? There's different ways. Like I teach different ways to sell with a podcast, but the one that we learned that was the most productive, and we learned this sort of the hard way, right? I was telling you before we jumped on, we got to this point where we're like, okay, we're not growing our list. We're not getting consistent revenue. Even though we got a great audience, we might have to shut this down. Because we're a business, right? We had a podcast, but we were a business. And we made a last second decision. Well, first we made a decision to go to San Diego to traffic and conversions event.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it was almost like Russell Brunson was hiding in the woods and saw me buy my tickets, hiding in the bushes, starts throwing expert secrets at me, right? It just shows up out of the blue. I get this book, I ordered it, I started reading it, and I connected so much with it. Then he starts showing up saying Funnel Hacking Live, and I'm like, we got to go to this. We barely have enough money to go to this. We got to go to this. So my partner's like, what do you feel like we need to do? And I was like, when I think, it makes more sense logically to go to the other thing because we had planned it out. We had tickets. We had a hotel reservation. Yeah. Logic made sense. But heart and the feeling said, go to Funnel Hacking Live. So we dropped all that, got tickets, went to Orlando. Long story short, met awesome people there that were willing to help us, just like, hanging out. You know how it is. You just hang out in the hallway. You're talking to people and they're like, hey, that's a great idea. Let me share this with you. Blah, blah, blah. This is what worked for us. Between that and signing up for high ticket coaching at that event, the first time they did the 2CCX coaching program, we came back, started implementing, and the things we learned from that and taking action, right? I mean, you should have seen our action was horrible videos, bad scripts.
It was bad action. But it was action.
It was bad action. You're right. And but that's one of the biggest learning experiences I had because it changed everything. We continued to grow. That's when we hit like 150,000 monthly listeners. But the important thing was we started growing our list massively because we made a switch in the way that we asked people for their email address instead of just giving them.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, keep going.
Instead of trading one thing with them, we actually created a free members area resource center that was packed full of actionable tools and information that they could use. So they get into that and then immediately have the opportunity to buy after that in what I called an evergreen customer identifier funnel. I wasn't good at building funnels and designing them, but I could come up with names because I have a writing background, right? So I just come up with these fancy names. But that's how we ended up going to $500,000 in the next 12 months from that one little switch.
So that one little switch. And there's so many other entrepreneurs, business owners, marketers listening to this, watching this. And, it comes with the territory, beating your head against the wall. Like, what am I doing? Why is this working? Why is this not working? You may be someone that doesn't have a list listening to this, watching this. You may be somebody that hasn't broken out, quote to unquote. You might be somebody that has broken out, has made over 7 figures, and you're going through a new product or service and you're like, man, shoot, maybe I can't do it again. Either way, there's all different parts of our journey. I hope everyone hears that there is that one point that it can flip. And really it's bad action or good action, emphasis on just the action. And that's what you did. So then there's a couple things we're going to hit on here that everyone listening, watching, stay tuned. There's frameworks and stuff that Evans is going to continue to drop. This is going to be great. I see some more people jumping on. Please, this is a great time, by the way, to ask any questions live while Evans is here. Ask what you'd like to know regarding podcasts and some of the switch. Right now, in the part of his journey that we're focused on, is the one pivotal thing that helped him go from $0 and 0 lists to, you just kind of skipped over it. You said 150,000 plus downloads.
Maybe you can share average.
average.
That was the
which
average.
led to
some months we had 190,000. We never hit the 200,000 mark. It was always a, come on, man, why can't we do it? But
but
we could. It was organic.
You built organically to millions of downloads. How you crossed? What was the amount? 5?
Eventually, when I left the business, it was at like 4.5, 4.8 million.
Yes, almost 5 million downloads. How? And I know you know some of these numbers roughly, right? Roughly. Mm-hmm. The average podcast in its lifespan gets how many downloads?
Gosh, I wouldn't, I don't know that number. I'll be glad to say I don't know that number, but I did see something today that only like 1% of the podcasts actually that get out there actually continue to be published, because people just drop off because they don't get listeners.
And there's like, I happen to hear this stat like recently, which is why it was in my head, but it was something that was like significantly lower than 10,000 downloads ever in the life of the average podcast. It was like really low. Yeah. And so and then like most don't make it past like 6 episodes or something. And so to build a podcast that gets to just about 5 million downloads in general, or past even 1 million, huge win. And then to also make it profitable, like this is a really big deal. And here's the thing. I know there's a lot of people in our audience that don't like just the direct sell. It's uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. They don't know how to do it. What to say, or even if they do, it's sales labor. You got to have the conversation. You got to get into it. So I felt like, number one, the work you're doing right now is one, it's working. Number two, your approach is something that I feel a lot of our audience is really going to resonate all around this idea of reciprocity selling. It's so hard. I have it up on big letters over here. It's so hard for me to remember to say, but you have a really, really good approach, and you did that organically with the podcast. We've got into some of the results that you've generated. You said that switched for you by having a hub of all the resources. But Evans, if I need to take time to build all that, how long is that going to take? And how did you manage that? Because you have some really cool ways of how you built that.
Yeah. And it was funny. That was the question that immediately hit me, because we had this grand idea, right? I won't go too deep into how we got it, but the reason I got it, I was excited. And then I was like, deer in headlights. How are we going to create this thing? And one thing I'll tell people though, like when I left, we had over 220 items in this resource area. But Here's what I want to tell everybody is you can start with 4 or 5. You don't have to go, when I say these numbers, you don't have to like jump and think, well, I don't have 100 things, or I don't have, if you've got 4 or 5 things you can add in there, you can easily create video content based around overcoming an objection, overcoming a false belief, slap that in there quickly, because when your people come in and start viewing that, and then now what I do teach is to get on a call down the road, right? You've already knocked over some of those objections. You've knocked over some of those false beliefs. So you don't have to go through that in the call. So the actual sales call becomes more of a conversation, almost like a mindset conversation, and giving them the opportunity to see that you offer them a clear path to the transformation that they want, instead of convincing them that they need to buy something, right? So that all happens just to go back real quick to the reciprocity part. Yeah. Here's what we found that worked so well, right? At every point of this, that when I go back and look at it and what I teach now, every step from reaching out initially to find a bystander to take the step to become a listener, from a listener to a lead, and a lead to get on the phone and to get to buy your thing, as long as you are, cultivating that connection by giving them good content, and the kind of content that actually allows them to sort of feel the feeling and have a vision of where they want to get, and then you show them a plan for getting there. If you do that every step of the way, you're building so much trust through this process. And at the same time, then what we did was we gave them that members area where they came in, they got some free content, they had an immediate opportunity to buy on the thank you page. But if they didn't, and here's the key I want to share with everybody, we would reach back out to them, and we had a natural conversation through
Was
email.
that via email?
Hey,
email. Okay.
Yeah. Through email, we would say, like, hey, we just added a new thing in your members area. It does this. It'll help you do this. And everything that was in there had an actionable result that it created, right? It wasn't fluff. So when we did that, it kept the conversation going. It kept us top of mind. It got our emails opened at like 46% open rate. And 80% of our high value buyers, I did the numbers, so I remember this like, by heart.
Yeah.
80% of the high value buyers that spent the most with us are repeat buyers that had highest average cart value. Mm-hmm. They all came out of that members area.
Really? That's interesting.
And that's where the reciprocity is, right? So it's like, hey, we didn't say, go buy this thing, go buy this thing. We said, hey, we're here to help you. We're here to help you feel what it feels like to get that transformation you want. Have the vision to be able to see it. We're going to show you the path to it, and we're going to give you things, demonstrate that we can get you there. And then boom, they would buy from us. And it was amazing how it worked. I mean, we had people that would reach out to us and say, I went in that toolbox and I got this one thing. I went out and closed a house, got a listing, sold it, got a $5,000 commission check from a free thing. And then they're like, what do you have to sell? What can I buy?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was just amazing. So that's why I call it the reciprocity selling process. But now in the framework, we still do have a call because we work mostly with high ticket coaches, high ticket service providers, anybody with a high ticket offer. So you still get on a call, but by the time you get to that, it's almost as if they're just waiting to hand you their credit card through the phone.
Yeah. Yeah. You're hitting on something that's, I think, really, really important. And it's nurturing.
Exactly.
It's building a relationship. It's not usually when somebody feels like that guy or that girl and they're getting into the sales conference, it's because they're going for the ask too soon. It's cold. It doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
It's the very common analogy that people will use relationally when it comes to sales. If it's like you ask someone to get married on the first date, it's like, well, usually some people have done that. It's not that it doesn't work. If you ask for the sale right away directly, it's not that doesn't work, but it also has a feel to it. And it also has a very, 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 very low close percentage. So
right.
There's other approaches like yours where you can say, hey, you know what? Let's give each other some space to see if this makes sense. Hey, why don't you just hop in here? If you want to learn roughly anything around this topic, this is going to be a great resource for you. Oh, it is. Okay, let me hang in here. Wow, this is really great stuff. I would like some more, please. And 80% of people say, yep, I'd like to, here's my Visa, here's my MasterCard. Let's do this. So, and that doesn't take your time. And so whether that nurturing's in a Facebook group and or like a membership site that you built, the nurturing's taking place. So really, really key factor there.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up because we've got some client, we actually had a coaching client who was like, I'm tired of ClickFunnels. I don't want to use anything else. I know how to do my Facebook group. Can I just send them there? And we were like, yeah, you can use what used to be units. Now it's guides to provide them that information and cultivate it that way. Use the questions and something like Group Funnels, which you guys use, and Groups Pro is another tool out there to capture that email address and start the nurturing process. But I think one of the biggest lessons I learned, and it's one of the things that I teach now too, and you hit on it 100%, is I was very transactional before I learned this lesson, right? And then I went more to the transformational. How can I help this person have a transformation in every step of the process? And you know what? We had people that listened to the podcast and they immediately bought and then bought the next thing. Then we jumped on the phone with them and upsold them into like an all-inclusive package. So you have those people too. But then you have some people I was able to track, and we would get this big sale on like 2 or 3 of our high ticket courses. Yeah. And I would go back and like, look, where did that person come from? Well, 8 months ago, they opted into our members area. They opened emails. They never purchased anything, nothing low ticket at all. But then boom, all of a sudden they bought like our highest ticket products and services.
There you go.
And it was that was a big lesson for me. I have to be 100% honest. And I was like, okay, it's about building the relationship. And when you build that relationship, not only do you get revenue, but you get renewals.
Yeah.
Right. Because you continue to collaborate with that person. You do things like you guys are great at, giving them shout outs, supporting them when they have success. Talk about it, bring them on your podcast, let them shine instead of you. And it creates a co-creative and collaborative, sort of environment on the back end, which keeps people staying in your programs and services. And they refer people to you as well. So it's good. It's a win-win for everybody involved. And it's much easier, as you know, and I'm sure everybody watching this, it's easier. I tell people it's easier to keep your podcast listeners than to find new ones. So don't forget about them, constantly give them really good content. But it's also easier to keep a happy customer than to go out and have to find new ones all the time, right?
Easier and cheaper.
Yes, exactly. Good point.
Well, so I know you've worked, you've built this model. Definitely, it's really valuable. So anyone listening or just tuning in, watching this, you need to have a nurture sequence, a nurture strategy or plan process, a part of your acquisition, for your business or your product or service that you're selling. And this is led into frameworks for you. And so I know that you've, I'll put it up here on the screen, high profit DCP framework, which is Dream Client Podcast framework, right?
Right.
Some of the things that you've started sharing, are those pieces of this framework, or are there additional pieces of this framework as well?
Definitely. That's a lot of the framework. And the whole point is it's high profit because it's organic. You can transition. And I tell my clients this all the time. I'm like, hey, look, let's just get you to a certain revenue level or get your offers and everything dialed in, get the system functioning first. Then we can start doing some paid traffic. We did it all organically, but I always believe that you can survive organically. The business that we had went from 0 to $500,000 in 12 months organically using this framework. But then it also, after I left, here's the beautiful thing. Like when I left to go out and teach other people what I was doing, I felt so bad, first of all, but my business partner, he was all for it. He was really cool. I had this horrible conversation in my head over and over about how it was going to go. Yeah. And then when we got there and I told him I needed to go out on my own, I wanted to share this with other people. He was like, how can I help? And that's how I knew. I was like, it was a great business partner, and a great mentor and friend. But, when I left, he continued running this with just a small team. We only had like 2 or 3 people on the team. And one of the guys was like a videographer, a funnel builder. So we didn't even really use him. Right. So that's small crazy. Team. And here's the thing that I loved even more about it. When I talked to Pat, my past business partner, and he gave me this amazing testimonial about it, he actually said that the thing that he appreciated most was he was able to do what he loved, just speak into the microphone, share his message, and everything worked in the background. So it gave him freedom too. But then he went on to grow that beyond 7 figures and then actually had multiple bidders to buy the business because they, what they saw was an actual business. It was no longer just a podcast. It was an actual business that had a list building process, a very valuable list, which they loved, very big audience, which we had built that was very dedicated. And, it had a revenue stream on the back end, and it all could, and they also saw like who all is running this? He's like, well, I've got me, I've got a writer, I've got a social media person and a VA, it was like, and an editor,
lit up.
So, so it's, but that framework, I've tweaked it and it's evolved, it's changed over the years. And now I've found that one of my favorite, and who I like to work with the most, because I actually have created multiple selling points within the whole process now. So it's no longer just bring them into the members area, give them the opportunity to buy where they watch something, they book a call, but you can also hit, if you're a high ticket coach or a service provider, you can sell on the front end by bringing the right guests on your show, right? By reaching out, targeting the right people, bringing them on. You can go on other podcasts by doing a specific strategies to find the right podcast to go on as a guest. deliver so much value that host then, and this has happened to me before without any forethought, they reach out and they're just like, when they're done, they're like, wow, how can I work with you? You know, and it's like, when I started seeing that happening multiple times, I saw a pattern. I'm like, okay, I need to sort of adjust my way of thinking, because there's multiple sales points within this whole framework, right? But it's all designed to be high profit, organic, and it's designed to be built with a smaller team, and it's designed to get you your dream client and keep that dream client, right? So the people, the way you talk to them, the way you share with them, the content you create, everything is done in a specific way to connect with that person and then nurture the relationship and make sure you're working with the kind of people you want to work with.
I really hope everyone watching, listening to this continues to do so, and they're catching a few of the things that you're saying. Number one, nurturing people. And if it's a Facebook group, membership site, invite people into it, and all the conversations that you're having in marketing, just store it there. Like, just upload it one time, and then it's already there, and then invite more people into that. It's a great experience for them. Number two, you said, is the guest that you invite on. The guest that you invite on should be an ideal client or potential ideal client, right? Where you're building
or have
rapport.
A lot of ideal clients, right?
Exactly. And so it's a way where you can continue to build relationship, talk before and after the podcast, and all of them won't, go lead into a sale, but done right, a lot of them can. So that was a big one that you mentioned. And another one that kept just blaring at me that I'd like to come back to you and ask a few more questions around is team, small team. Because if you're a solo entrepreneur listening to this, this is a really helpful strategy to pay attention to. If you're an entrepreneur that has a couple VAs or EA and your executive assistant, virtual assistants, and you're just kind of starting out, but I can't quite operate, like a bigger company. This is a really good strategy for you to use, because there's a lot of leverage to it. There's a lot of attention to it. And that all said, let's hang out in the team. You said that there was like 5 or less.
Well, when I started, it was myself. There was Pat. It was me, Pat, the host, who he just recorded, right? Then we had an editor that edited some of the podcasts. She was in the Philippines. That was the team.
VA. Yep.
Yeah, the VA in the Philippines. That was the team initially. Okay. Yeah, and we grew. And here's the thing: is now when I teach it and I talk about it, it's this one big system that just goes and runs on autopilot, right? But it was built piece by piece, because
and if we could go through those pieces, that would be cool. So people could kind of. One thing I think that's not talked about a bunch is, here's what I started with. Okay, great. Logically, I can go get a VA to help with some of the editing and uploading and maybe some keyword stuff that make it a little, task heavy. You can record an episode and be done and just kind of go through your week. But when you go for who's your second or third hire and why, and how much do you pay them? And it's getting into more of those details. Like, how do I actually practically grow this thing from, 0 to 1 million downloads?
Yeah. Well, what we did initially, it was me handling pretty much everything. I was the guy, because I came from a background of being a writer or editor as a freelancer. That's sort of how I dipped my toes in some of the marketing world. And then I eventually became a marketing strategist. But so I came in and pushed hard. I did everything. It was basically, I created the strategy.
Okay, strategy.
I created the strategy. I would go out. I created like all the proactive content marketing approach that we used to grow the audience, right? We were very proactive. This is where my content marketing background came in, because I'd never worked with a podcast before. And this guy's asking me to help grow his podcast. I'm like, yeah, I can do it. And so then I'm like, how can I do this? But I focused on what I knew. And I knew if we just went out to where our ideal listeners, which I eventually started calling them ideal listener customers, where they lived, where they were on the internet, and we put our podcast in front of them. And I'm not talking about just a social media post. I'm talking about actually getting your embeddable player, throwing it in some content, written content, and getting it out there, right?
So
that's
for
one
blogs.
way.
So you would connect.
Blogs.
You started reaching out to blog owners and say, "Hey, here's the embed code, and here's why you should put it on your blog.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, one of the things that I use, we actually had a very big player in the real estate space, Inman.com, which is like the marketing and sales, website entity for real estate. If you're a real estate agent watching this, you've heard of Inman.com. It's almost like when you say go to Google as a real estate agent, you go to Inman.com. But we were lucky enough to get on there where we produced written content for them with an embeddable player in the content. And one way, I didn't know much about SEO, but I sort of threw this out as like, okay, here's a Hail Mary. I'm going to see if this works, because they were pushing back on doing the embeddable player. They're like, just throw in the link. We can give you links. And I was like, well, and that wasn't bad. We had links in the bio, but we wanted people to immediately start listening, because we knew if we could get them to immediately listen without putting another barrier there, right? It's like, oh, I'll go listen to it later. No, you won't. You get busy. Just like we were saying, you won't remember when you wake up in the middle of the night, right? Yep. So I actually had a conversation with the editor, and I'm like, well, if people are there and they push the play button and they stay on the page for like 20, 30 minutes listening to that episode, and there may be some SEO people saying this isn't right, but this is how it worked for me. I was like, this is what that means. That means they're going to stay on your page longer, which Google is going to see that, and the bounce. They're not going to be bouncing right off to go somewhere else. So it's going to help your pages rank higher. And they were like, that sounds great. Let's try that. It was a win-win for everybody, right? And I mean, I actually thought that was true, and it may be true. I'm not sure. I'm not an SEO expert, but I had just enough knowledge to sound like I knew what I was talking about, right? So that was one way. So I was doing that myself. I was growing. I started the growth part myself. It wasn't until we hit about 75,000 monthly listeners, and we started realizing, okay, if we don't do something about consistent revenue and list building, we're not going to make it much farther, that I then decided, I was like, okay, where's the one place that just takes up so much of my time for me? And that was writing. And, because I would repurpose the show notes. I would write them. I would create an article out of them. I'd create a different kind of article for something else. So I'd sort of repurpose the articles. So I went out and hired a writer. And I taught the writer what I was doing. And then I taught the writer how to go actually put the placement. Then from there, as we continued to grow, we brought on like another VA that was multi-purpose. She was awesome at so many things. She did our customer service. She did our social media. She did things like that. So she was very multi-purpose and just amazing person. So she came on and started helping us. Then as we started getting into the world of funnels and creating more videos, after we created our first funnel and our first videos, and they were so horrible, even though they converted, we went and hired a guy that was, luckily we found a guy who was not only a great funnel maker, but he starts telling us his real superpower and what he really enjoys doing is video editing and video creation. And we're like, okay, so now we got a 2-for-1, right? So that was basically our team that we ran with the whole time. Was just myself, the video funnel guy, an editor. That's all she did was just take the podcast, slap it into Libsyn, put the intro and outro on it, put it in Libsyn, send it out. And then we had the VA sort of that did everything. And then the writer, who he had a few extra tasks that he would help with. He became very valuable in a lot of different ways too. But that was basically it for this whole process.
That's awesome. Thank you. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say it was the system. I'm not a systems guy. And, you and I have had this conversation before. I see spreadsheets and systems and I go like, but I quickly learned if I could just figure out a way to duplicate it, give it to somebody else or have it there for somebody else to take it if it was needed, that things worked so much better. Right. And once we built that whole framework, that whole system, it just ran on its own with very little effort once we got the momentum behind it.
So true. So true. Thank you for walking us through kind of the team piece so people could just see and hear the inside scoop, what it's like. Yeah. It's a really lean team. It's a great way to get content and attention out there. And you emphasized harder in that time around on the list. You shared a great strategy of reaching out to other content creators, bloggers, and they were posting, embedding your podcast so they could listen right away, not later, right away. And that grew listenership.
Yep,
you walked through the
really
pitch of kind of how you talked with them, which is really helpful. Thank you for sharing that. So that's a great strategy people can take and use right now. And as that grew, you're like, all right, well, we need their information. We need to continue to build a deeper relationship with them. And you did that through the high profit DCP framework. You had that place for them to nurture, and then started offering them products and services, and that grew. And all these standard operating procedures it took to run all this stuff became the business that ultimately someone purchased for a nice amount. So hopefully people can hear and see that journey. And you can maybe do that once in life, maybe you do it multiple times in life.
And I'll share real quick, Chris, if I can share too with everybody. Here's that I didn't go in this to be an operations manager, to be a manager, to be a team builder. So I know there's people out there. If I went back now, I would be like, hey, I need to find somebody that could do that in a much higher level. And it probably would have gone to that when we moved it. But what I did and figured out quickly was, if I just start doing like Loom videos of the things I'm doing every day, it pays off dividends so much down the road. Even if you think you're not going to ever, it's like, oh, well, I'm just writing an email and doing this. It's like, just go ahead and, video it and have it in a vault somewhere. Because eventually you'll be able to say, okay, now I just want to step away and do the thing I love. And now I can just hand all this over to a team. So that was a huge win for me, just to start figuring. And it took me like about 9 or 10 hits to the head to figure that out. But once I figured it out, I'm like, why wasn't I doing this all along? It's the best way to do it. Just, do a video of it, show other people how you did it, and then go from there. And, and I also allowed our team members to take those videos and create their own way of doing it so that it was theirs. So they had ownership, right? So they could do it. They could figure out how to do it better than me. I just gave them sort of the baseline and then let them sort of mold it to fit their superpowers and their skills.
Refine. Yeah, that totally makes sense. So Loom is a life changer. It's a life changer. And whatever you use, if those that aren't familiar with Loom, please familiarize yourself with that. LOOM.com is just a free video, a screen recording feature. Does some other things too if you'd like it to. But whatever you use to record your screen, your process, because the truth is, while we're all special little snowflakes, we can be replaced. And replace the stuff that you don't like doing sooner than later. Here's something I'd love to spend some time on. I love talking to entrepreneurs in general. I love talking to entrepreneurs that are also parents, and specifically entrepreneur parents that pass on whether directly or unconsciously to their kids, and in hearing kids get to practice this and learn kind of this fun world of creating. You share a great story. I think where I'm going with all this, Evans, is please introduce to the audience Chloe.
Chloe is she's my 10-year-old daughter, and and I will say, I want to tell everybody this. I was a little inspired by some of this from your story, Chris, because we were in a book. We were in the book together, $1 Million Dads, and I read your chapter.
What are we doing? We need to be shouting. You have it close by. We need to be shouting out our book.
But I read your story and I was like, wow, that is so cool. And while I wasn't as directly influencing my daughter, I mean, occasionally she was always interested in what I was doing in here, right? In here, because she's in the same house as me all the time. Yeah. And she would see things, and she found out about the podcast. She's like, oh, she'd see that I was on the internet talking, and it got her really interested. But what I didn't know, like during the pandemic year when schools were shut down and she had to stay here, she was up above me, and I'm down here doing work all day. And during that time, I knew she had she was starting to develop a love for YouTube, and I knew she liked, animated things. But what I didn't realize is that she wasn't just consuming things, right? Like Russell Brunson said, she wasn't a consumer. She became a creator. And over this time, it blew my mind. I mean, she was creating videos from scratch, animated characters. She's learned how to edit. She's learned how to remove backgrounds from images. She's learned how to drop music into things, create thumbnails, all these things. And here's the thing that everybody could learn from this, right? I asked her, I was like, how are you doing this? Because you haven't asked me anything. She's like, well, when I need to know an answer, I just go, I like YouTube. So I go in YouTube, I search, I watch somebody, I learn, I try it, I get better at it. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's like the solution for every entrepreneur, right? The information's out there, implement without expectation. And if you fall down, get up and go again. It was such a great lesson. But I want to jump from there to the other thing I shared with you real quick is that we have an awesome friend who introduced me to something. I don't want to talk about it because I don't know if it's out in the public yet, but I will say her name is Tigo, and she's an amazing entrepreneur. But my daughter, I had this discussion with her afterwards, and my daughter had another lesson that she shared that we can all learn from.
So good.
When I told her, I was like, I'm thinking about doing this podcast, but it'll also be video, so people can watch. I was like, that's really right up your alley. I was like, and here's the truth. We're on the way to school. She was mad because I wouldn't let her have my phone to play Roblox on the way to school, that I wanted to have a conversation because I don't get that little time together. So I had to sort of switch it to get a buy-in. I was like, so I'm having this conversation. I'm thinking about doing a video. I was like, what would be cool? You're really good at this stuff. You could have your own video podcast, right? So I'm trying to pull her into the conversation. So immediately she lights up. She starts talking, coming up with ideas. And she's got all these grand ideas on what her podcast is going to be about. But the first thing she said was, what I want to do is I'm going to interview famous YouTubers that I love. And I want to talk to them once. But if I have a show, I'll be able to get them on my show. But they also have millions of subscribers. And I don't really have, I think she has like 20, maybe 100 or something on her one little channel that we've let her build. But she's like, I can get them to come on my show, and then their people will come over and subscribe to my show, and I'll build my audience that way. And I'm like, that is amazingly smart, because that's one of the ways I teach podcasters to build their audience, right? It's like,
OPA,
how does she know
other
this
people's
stuff,
audience.
Right? All right. And then we were joking because you guys were like, hey, when's her show going to start? And, or something. You're like, can we hire her? I'm like, she's already told me that I'm going to be the assistant. Like I'm not even a co-host. I'm just an assistant on her show. So it's amazing stuff.
Evans, if you stay focused and you work hard, like you can work your way up.
Right. Right. I got to show results though. The only way I move up is to give her results, right? She's going to put a number. Knowing her, she's going to put a hard number on it too, probably.
That's it. You gotta produce results, and then maybe someday you can be an assistant to the regional manager. And I don't know if you're an office man, but I love this story, and one part that I've really loved seeing my boys like start their business and focus on Chloe here, go through her journey of being a creator, not a consumer. Oh, what a cool line. What a cool perspective to think about. Create more than you consume. That ratio in general for all of us is a really powerful thought and convicting thought, right? So, but playing with that as she creates, what's so cool is that I'm just going to go after all the top people. When I'm hearing you say that, I'm going to go after all the top people, and they're just going to come on my show. And you know what I was thinking? I was like, of course they're going to go on 10-year-old Chloe's show, because it's unique and it's different, and I can already feel her passion like in it, the way you're talking about it. And so like that's like that simplicity is the thing I hope that I can stay connected to myself. I love connecting with you and other entrepreneurs that stay connected to that, because that's the juice. Like that's the core of each business that continues to grow. It's an expression. It's a story that you're sharing with more people, and you don't have to convince. You don't have to, I don't know, do all like this endless conversation and tactic and all that stuff just gets so convoluted so fast. And when it comes to content and building a business, it can, I don't know, it comes back to that simple place. So that all said, what's the name of her show?
Oh, I don't know yet. She hasn't told me, so we'll see. We'll see.
Still on those ideas. Keep us
Yeah,
posted, please.
it's in the idea stage.
Idea stage. So keep us posted on the show for sure. And yeah, any connections or outreach, they'll be fun to support the journey.
Definitely. I mean, and I'm glad you said, in the word you said, connection. I think the biggest thing that I've learned through this whole experience and with the framework that I've developed over time, it's about connection, right? It's not about, like you mentioned, it's not the tactics. It's not the headline. It's not the color of your button. It's not the hacks, the tricks, the certain email sequence. It's really about the connection. And that's why we love my partner and I, Michelle Abraham, who I work with, who's an amazing entrepreneur herself, and she's helped launch over 200 shows. We really focus on podcasts because of connection, right? Because it allows you to get your message out. And she likes to say your uniqueness is your greatness, right? Your uniqueness is your greatness. And you get that out in a way that truly connects with people. And if you put that into your sales and marketing as well, instead of getting caught up in the tactics and the hacks and all these things, and focus on that, how can I connect with this person, give them a transformation and serve them? That's all that matters, right? So connection is huge. So but yeah, I think probably works, right? If anybody's not watched the whole thing and they just go back like 5 minutes, just listen to the story of my daughter. You probably learn more in that segment from her experience than you'd ever learn from me. So a lot of gold there. A lot of gold.
There's been some excellent takeaways throughout the way, practical ways of nurturing audiences, building lists, how to build a team. We covered today, OPA, other people's audiences, how to reaching out to strategic partners like content creators and bloggers. There's multiple value that if you're just kind of tuning in now that we covered in today's episode, definitely take the time to listen to what Evans was sharing today. And for those that did listen to all that and want some more of it, where's the best place to find you, Evans?
Well, as you and I were talking about earlier, one of the things that I like to do is just make it nice and simple. And I tell people, come out, find me on Facebook, Evans Putnam. There's only two of us, but one's my page and one's me. Just come find Evans Putnam on Facebook. Friend me, shoot me a message. And if you say, tell me you heard this in Sales Ascenders, because we're in this together, right? I'm here to serve everybody watching this as much as I've learned from them and from you guys, Sean and Chris. It's been an amazing journey, just learning so much that, come and just tell me like, hey, I saw you in the Sales Ascenders group. I'll jump on a connect call with anybody. And, Chris, you probably like spent way too much time on the phone with me. Like, when is he going to let me get off the phone? But I will give you value, right? It's like, I'm not going to try 100%. To sell you, but if there is the opportunity for me to help you in any way and for us to work together, or for me to connect you with somebody else, which is a huge part of our whole podcasting world, is the connection and networking, I'll do that. So just come to Facebook, friend me, shoot me a message, say, hey, and let's have a real conversation.
Appreciate that, Evans. Everyone, you can find him on Facebook. That's the best place. Evans, you do it right. You're getting results. I really respect and appreciate the way that you show up in life and in business. And thank you for taking some of that time and sharing that value with our audience today. And for all Sales Ascenders listening, the Spotlight series will be back next week with more fellow Sales Ascenders that are out solving real problems for real people. Hey, we don't have to do this alone. You guys enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll see you back next time.